TikTok, I told everyone that I left Chicago after I was called as a witness in the Code of Silence case. The Code of Silence case was a civil case that was meant to expose the Code of Silence in the Chicago Police Department. And a really horrific Chicago police officer named Joseph Frugoli was at the center of that case. Until now, I have not told people the full story of what went on in my life after I was called as a witness in this case. But now I'm going to tell the truth because a South Tucson, Arizona police officer who was in his cruiser alone followed me while I was alone into the back of a parking lot behind a funeral home. I had gone into that parking lot because while I was headed to the local grocery store, Food City, I was FaceTiming with a friend of mine who works as a counselor at a domestic violence agency. And she saw the police officer follow me and said, "Hey, Chris, why is that cop following you?" I held up my phone and yelled, "I don't know why that cop is following me." And the cop could see that I was talking to someone on FaceTime and he left. I am now going to file a report with COPA in Chicago using the name of a police officer from Chicago who might have contacted the South Tucson police officer to hurt me. And I'm going to file a full report with the DOJ. And for the first time, thanks to my friend who works as a domestic violence counselor, I've worked up the courage to say, I believe witnesses who are called to testify against Chicago police officer Joseph Frugoli in the Code of Silence case were intimidated by Chicago police officers and police officers from other jurisdictions so that the Code of Silence would not really be exposed. I will tell you that I also got help from Chicago police officers and police officers in other cities who helped me off the books. There was also a Chicago police officer who was investigating this with Chicago Police Internal Investigations, and she got hit with false claims of excessive force. That's something that happens quite often with police officers who cross the thin blue line, who break the Code of Silence, to report police officers who use excessive force. The former Chicago police officer who was at the center of the Code of Silence case, Joseph Frugoli, not only used excessive force, he tortured completely innocent people, particularly professional black men and black college students. And he did this while drinking on the job as a Chicago police officer. To this, Joseph Frugoli tortured me when I was a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was working as a security guard at the Rock and Roll McDonald's on Chicago Avenue in Chicago, Illinois, of course. And the Rock and Roll McDonald's is a popular gathering spot for people who are leaving nightclubs. I was doing nothing more than going into the McDonald's with my friend Elijah, who's also black, and I was going to buy a Big Mac. How do I know that I was going to buy a Big Mac? Because at the time, I was a vegetarian. I had been a vegetarian since I was 14 years old, but I ate a Big Mac 4 times a year. So I wasn't really a vegetarian, but that helped me remember the circumstances. And Joseph Frugoli was working as a security guard at this McDonald's location with other Chicago police officers who were all drinking on the job. And as I entered the Rock and Roll McDonald's, Joseph Frugoli asked for my identification. I provided him with my University of Wisconsin-Madison student identification because I believe in acting respectful towards police officers. And in Chicago, the city has a really bad gang problem. I think we should call it organized crime because that's what it is. And calling these organized crime organizations gangs is basically saying that people of color can't run organized crime organizations the same way that historical mafia runs an organized crime organization. They actually do a better job. So, knowing that this is a problem in Chicago, also having a stepbrother who was in the hierarchy of the Latin Kings, I thought that Joseph Frugoli might have been looking for a suspect he thought resembled me, so I showed him my University of Wisconsin-Madison ID that would have shown that I was in Madison, Wisconsin, attending school only a month before. Upon showing Joseph Frugoli my University of Wisconsin-Madison ID, he said, college boy, you think you're better than us, meaning that I thought I was better than police officers and I presented my college ID. Well, you're just another N-word, only he didn't say N-word. And then Joseph Frugoli dragged me to the McDonald's parking lot, banged my head on the asphalt until I went unconscious, and I didn't become conscious again until I found myself handcuffed to a chair in the basement of the rock and roll McDonald's. And then Joseph Frugoli, along with 2 other Chicago police officers, tortured me for 3.5 hours to say to them, I'm just another N-word. I did not do that. And I prayed during that whole time that if I was unalived, that what happened to me would end up in something being done about police brutality. Because I was the first black editor of the University of Wisconsin-Madison paper, and so something happening to me during police torture, I thought it would have resonated across the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. And by the way, to verify that I was a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the people who conducted the falsified internal investigation called my newspaper the Daily Cardinal. And I found out about this because Lulie Treat, who's now CEO of Crooked Media, and her best friend Greg told me they were in the office when the investigators called the Daily Cardinal newspaper to verify whether or not I was a student. And Greg said he doesn't work here anymore. And then they told me about it to set up a lawsuit against the city of Chicago. By the way, Lulie also asked me if I wanted her to pass the bar in Illinois so she could represent me. Joseph Frugoli did stuff like this over and over until he unalived 2 young Mexican-American men, Fausto Manzara, I'm sorry if I mispronounced his last name, and Andrew Cazares. Joseph Frugoli took the lives of these promising young men while he was driving under the influence. He had been arrested for driving under the influence 4 previous times, but Cook County judges dropped cases against Chicago police officers who should have been charged with a DUI. And so the firm that represented the families of these 2 young men, Kavanaugh, wanted to expose the full record of Joseph Frugoli working under the influence, driving under the influence, and getting away with his awful deeds because he was a Chicago police officer, because that was meant to expose the code of silence. And so people who Frugoli had also tortured were called as witnesses to establish this record. I believe we were all intimidated. And because of what the South Tucson police officer did and threats I received at my door in May to be unalived by the South Tucson police, I now fear for my life. And I am going to be leaving Tucson under domestic violence protection. The White House Constituent Services has been helping with this issue. And the White House has been helping out because I've been refused constituent services from Democratic elected officials, and that includes Mark Kelly, Raul Grijalva. So since Frugoli tortured Latinos as well as black men and unalived 2 young Mexican-American men, this guy sold out his community. He's an awful congressman, by the way. And I was also refused constituent services by Kirsten Sinema's office. Fortunately, I was in the same National Council of the Raza leadership group with Ruben Gallego, and his office said if I moved to his district, they would definitely help. Thanks for the campaign issue, Senator Sinema, helping cover up police brutality and the unaliving of Mexican-American men. I am now going to be leaving Tucson. For my safety, I'm not going to tell anybody where I'm going, and I won't make TikToks from that place. Black Lives Matter also refused to get involved in bringing attention to the Code of Silence case. I think their message is important. I think as a police torture victim, they're a highly problematic organization. The place I'm going to will allow me to get on an Amtrak and go to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to use my experience at Booz Allen to push for real structural police reform. And when I was rendered housing insecure for 2 years because of this case, one of the things I did is I traveled the country looking at alternative policing strategies like Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, to include in this cohesive plan. If I'm not unalived by a South Tucson police officer, before I leave. And because of incidents like that, I think there was extensive witness intimidation, not just me.